Hi there, and welcome to this month's edition of What's New in Google Apps. My name is Stephen Long, and I'm a technical trainer and course developer at Google for Work based in Dublin, Ireland. And working together with Barry Schmell, my team member based in California, we put this presentation together for all you Google Apps admins out there. The first thing I want to mention here is our change of format. As you may have noticed, you're watching this on YouTube. Recently, we changed the format of our popular What's New in Google Apps webinar series from scheduled live sessions to these video recordings hosted on YouTube, so you can watch whenever you want and share them with your colleagues and users. Plus, the slides used in the video will be linked below so you can get more info or follow any of the links mentioned. The What's New videos provide a recap of all the features we've released in the past month that are of particular interest to Google Apps admins. Please feel free to put your comments and questions in the comment section below. If you're looking for a full rundown of all the features released last month, then check out the Google Apps release calendar, where you can see the date and type for each release. Or, alternatively, you can check out the What's New in Google Apps newsletter for a full rundown of all the features and more info on what they mean. You can find this newsletter on the What's New page above the release calendar. So, let's look at our agenda for this video. We'll start with some headline news, talk about some major marketplace updates, some changes to the mobile features important for admins, look at some general admin-specific updates, and finish on some API updates. Let's start with the headline news. As many of you may have heard by now, as of September 2nd, 2014, what was called Google Enterprise is now simply Google for Work. We believe that technology should make it easier to get things done, no matter where you work or what your job is. Millions of companies, large and small, have turned to Google to help them launch, build, and transform their businesses and help their employees work the way they live. Google never set out to create a traditional enterprise business. We wanted to create a new way of doing work. So, the time has come for our name, Google Enterprise, to catch up with our ambition, Google for Work. But don't worry, even though the name is changing, the product experience remains the same, as does our commitment to bringing you the best tools to run your business. Now, speaking of great tools for work, let's look at some marketplace updates. A major update for admins last month was the opening up of Google Apps Marketplace beyond apps administrators. The Google Apps Marketplace features hundreds of third-party apps that complement the suite of tools in Google Apps for Work. Previously, only admins could install these apps within an organization. Starting in September, employees can install these apps without involving their admin. So, if you work at an organization that uses Google Apps for Work, Google Apps for Education, or Google Apps for Government, your users now have greater access to apps that help you work faster, more efficiently, and collaboratively. Let's take a look at the admin console to see how this is done. Under Marketplace Apps, if you click the settings icon in the top right hand corner, click Manage Apps, and finally if you click Manage Access to Apps, what you're going to see here are the settings that you can adjust to manage and filter which third-party apps are available to your organization. First, you can choose Allow users to install any application from Google Apps Marketplace. Some important things to note here. These settings allow you to choose which Google Apps Marketplace apps are available for users to install. However, they don't block your users' ability to grant data access on third-party vendor websites. Also, these settings are forward-looking, which means that changing your selection to options 2 or 3 does not affect apps previously installed by an end user. By default, option 1 is selected, with the exception of K-12 EDU domains, where it's set to option 2. At launch, this means for rapid release domains, this feature will be defaulted to allow users to install any marketplace apps. Admins from scheduled release domains will see the admin console controls for this feature with the rapid rollout, and can disable it if so desired prior to the scheduled launch. Users from scheduled release domains who try to install an app prior to the scheduled rollout will receive an error message. So that's the default option. Next, you can choose Do not allow users to install any application from the Google Apps Marketplace, and again noting any previously installed apps won't be uninstalled. Finally, you can choose Allow users to install only whitelisted applications from the Google Apps Marketplace. Let's whitelist some apps and see how this affects my users. First, I'm going to save my changes, and when you click Save Changes, now you're going to see a Manage Whitelist link. After I click the link, it shows me that I don't have any whitelisted apps yet. So I'm going to add some. As you can see, there's a list of apps to whitelist. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to choose the first two and confirm that. Now you can see here, confirm 2 whitelisted apps for this domain. Now that I've whitelisted these apps, let's jump over to a user account in this domain and see how this setting change affects what the user sees when they go to the marketplace. As a user, to find and add third-party apps for Google Apps, you click the App Launcher icon. At the bottom, you click More, and then More Marketplace Apps. Here we can see that the only apps visible are now the ones that I've whitelisted by my admin. If I wish to install them, I can just click Install App. Next, let's go back to the admin console as the admin and turn off the ability to install apps altogether. So if I go to option 2 here, do not allow users to install any marketplace apps, and save changes. Now, if I go back to my user and I try and install some marketplace apps again by going to Launcher, More, and More for Marketplace, I'll be able to see plenty of different apps, but if I try and install one, I'm going to get an error message saying that my domain admin has disallowed the installation of these marketplace apps. As we are talking about Google Apps Marketplace, let's look at another announcement this month that involves marketplace apps. These days, technology moves fast and we want to keep our developer products moving and innovating fast too. Google APIs use the OAuth 2 protocol for authentication and authorization. We've been working with developers to migrate their Google Apps Marketplace apps from OAuth 1 to OAuth 2, as OAuth 1 has been officially deprecated since April 20th, 2012. It continues to work as per our deprecation policy, but we're moving towards the end of this deprecation timeline for the Google Apps Marketplace. Any developers out there, we encourage you to migrate to OAuth 2.0 as soon as possible. In most cases, apps developers have already worked with their customers to migrate to OAuth 2. However, for those apps that have not been migrated, the following September announcements apply. On September 30th, 2014, Google will no longer enable any new installs of OAuth 1 apps, and these apps will be removed from the Google Apps Marketplace. However, previously installed OAuth 1 apps will continue to work. On April 20th, 2015, if your application provider has not completed your migration to their OAuth 2 app, then the single sign-on functionality will stop working and the app icon will no longer appear in the app launcher. These changes improve integration, security, and management of third-party apps. Now, let's look at some of the mobile-specific updates for all you admins out there managing mobile devices in your domain. In September, we introduced a new iOS mobile device management solution known as iOS Sync for Google Apps, offering administrators an additional way to manage iPhones and iPads connected to Google Apps for Work accounts. iOS Sync is integrated right into the Google iOS apps. Today, these include Gmail, Google Drive, Docs, Sheets, and Slides, so your users don't have to download any additional app for device management, but your organization maintains its security needs. iOS Sync will support iOS 7, 8, and of course the new iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, and is now available for Google Apps for Work, Google Apps for Education, and Google Apps for Government. The main advantages of iOS Sync for users and administrators include: admins can enforce security policies when users sign into a Google app and enroll their device. This is especially useful if your domain has a Bring Your Own Device or BYOD policy. They can pre-configure Wi-Fi networks, and also there's support for existing policies like managing password requirements, encryption and camera policies, as well as actions like remotely wiping a device and activation approvals and blocking devices. Let's check out the admin console to see where we can set this up. Under Device Management, in the Mobile Management settings, and under Device Management settings, you'll find iOS Sync. iOS Sync is enabled for all users by default, meaning anyone within your domain can use the Google for Work iOS apps such as Gmail and Google Drive. You can also enforce additional mobile settings and enable iOS device management with just a few simple steps. But as you can see, the enforce is actually grayed out here at the moment. First off, you'll need to establish an Apple push notification certificate. To do this, your Google Apps account and Apple servers need to exchange certificate files. If we go back to the mobile section, you'll see that there's an area to set up Apple push certificate. I'm going to go through these steps right now just to show you how to set this up. First, download the certificate to your local machine. I'm going to hit download here, and then that's going to go into my local download folder. You can check the box to say I've downloaded the certificate for that particular step. Next, you need to sign in with an Apple ID. Apple requires a valid Apple ID to log into the Apple Push Certificate portal. If you don't currently have an Apple ID associated with a work account, you'll need to create one. We wouldn't recommend using a personal Apple ID unless you're setting this up for your personal Google Apps for Work domain. Let's run through the setup in the Cert portal. First of all, I'll just click Create Certificate, make a note of the domain you're doing this for. Finally, hit Choose File to upload the certificate that you just downloaded from Google. Google iOS Push Certificate.csr. Once you've done this, click Upload. You can see now that I've successfully created a push certificate with the following information: mobile device management, Google Inc. If you then download that certificate again to your local machine. Back in the admin console, once I've downloaded the push certificate, I can say I've got that step done. And finally, now I'll select the certificate to upload again into Google. Once all those steps are completed, I'll hit verify and the push certificate will be uploaded. Now that I've got an up-to-date Apple push certificate, that means I can use iOS Sync to manage iOS devices in my domain. This certificate will last for a year, and after a year you will need to renew it again. So this is really something you're only going to have to do once a year to make sure that your domain is up to date with an Apple push certificate. At this point, if I go back to my device settings and again find my iOS Sync section, you'll see now that Enforce is no longer grayed out. So if I click in the Enforce policies on iOS devices and save changes, now I'm going to be able to configure some device management policies for my iOS users. For example, I could go down to the bottom and set some network settings for my users, such as adding a wireless network and even a wireless password, so this is pre-configured for my users. So a major benefit of this update is simpler configuration, such as providing passwords for pre-configured Wi-Fi networks and setup of CalDAV and CardDAV. Once you've installed the Apple Push Certificate and enabled iOS Sync enforcement, your configured settings will not take effect until users in your domain have installed the Google Apps device policy profile on their devices. So let's take a look now at the user experience now that we've enforced policies for iOS Sync. By enforcing policies, what we're really saying here is that yes, we want our users to be able to connect with an iOS device. However, we want to ensure that the security on that device meets with all of the security policies before allowing the sync. In order to do that, we're going to have a device policy installed on the actual device. So let's say our user goes and tries to connect with their Google Apps account using Gmail or Drive apps on the iOS device. So let's say they're trying to sign into Gmail here. They add in their account details. They've created an account profile, and when they try and enable this account, what they're going to see is a device policy error. What this error says is that in order to use this device with this particular Google Apps for Work account, then you're going to have to install a security profile to keep the data safe. So this is the enforcement as the user sees it. If they click next, what they're going to see is a Google Apps device policy profile, and they get some information about what installing this profile does. It highlights to them that their admin is enforcing policies, configuring settings, and has the capability to remotely erase this device. When they click install and then install now, they're going to get a warning that just highlights to them that the administrator may be able to collect personal data, add and remove accounts, and install and manage apps, and of course then remotely erase this particular device as well. So it's really just outlining to the user the kind of security policies that are being put in place, and then they have to agree to these. If they click install, what they're going to see then is the Google Apps device policy payload profile has now been installed and related to that particular account. So then when they go back into their accounts page and turn their account on, they're just going to be able to sign in as normal and get into their Gmail through the app in this case. One thing to be aware of here is that you can only install one profile per device, so you couldn't set this up for multiple user accounts on a single device towards different domains. Next, we're going to take a look at some admin general updates. Continuing the theme of updates for iOS, A new version of the Google Admin app for iOS is now available in the App Store. This is for all those super admins who want to have the ability to still manage their Google for Work products on the go with their iPads and iPhones. This allows you to manage users and groups, review audit logs, and contact support, all while on the move. This latest release, version 1.1.0, contains some great new features, like improvements to searching users, the ability to switch between multiple accounts quickly, and a new settings page with settings like Remember Password. Be sure to check it out in the Google App Store. For all you admins out there using Google Apps Directory Sync, or GADS, to provision and sync your user information from an LDAP directory, the latest release of GADS, version 4.0.1, has several new features and bug fixes. The biggest change here is that GADS now requires using OAuth for authorization, where previously you could also use the admin credentials, also known as client login. This is no longer supported, as it's been deprecated. Customers using client login must now authorize using OAuth. For more information, see the Authorize Using OAuth section of the admin guide. Any customer already using OAuth will also need to authorize again with existing or new credentials, because this version of GADS uses different APIs, and the scopes for which the tokens are generated will also have changed. Another big backend change is that GADS now uses the Directory API instead of the deprecated Provisioning and Profiles Data APIs. We strongly recommend switching to the latest version of GADS. Old GADS versions will stop working once the Provisioning and Profiles Data APIs are discontinued on April 20th, 2015. The great news is that GADS will run faster using these new APIs. Some other updates will improve GADS usability on the front end, such as GADS now allowing several profile and shared contact fields like department, job title, office location and notes to be comprised of multiple concatenated LDAP fields, meaning it'll be easier to take information from your LDAP and make it clear and usable in Google Apps. For more information on this release of GADS, make sure to check the release notes and don't forget to download the new version. Also, we've introduced a date picker on the top right of the report section in the admin console to provide additional transparency to any reporting delays and unblock partial data feeds in the event some data is unavailable. In the admin console, if we go to reports, we can see a little bit more about this new update. As we can see, the reports show historical data generated for the last 7 days, the last month, the last 3 months, or the last 6 months. The date in the upper right indicates the most recent day for which report data is available. The pull-down arrow next to the date opens a calendar page where we can select another day to use for reports. The latest date for which all data points are present has a green background. This is usually 2 days prior to the current day. You can select another date beyond the full data date, but any later date you choose may have partial data or may only show a subset of the expected reports. The API will also return a warning if some data is missing. Okay, now we're going to take a look at some Chrome updates. Tying in with some of the other mobile updates that we mentioned earlier, let's talk about Chrome policies. Since April 2013, admins have had the capability to set 100 plus Chrome policies for users on Chrome devices, Windows, Mac, and Linux when they sign into Chrome with their Google Apps account. On September 23rd, we started providing an early preview of applying some of these same policies to Chrome on Android and iOS as well. This means in the Google Admin Console, you can select if supported policies should apply to Chrome on mobile devices. So, you can do things like set bookmarks, define proxies, or manage password policies once, and it will apply on Chrome on all 6 platforms, including mobile. Let's check out where we can enable this setting in the Admin Console. Under Device Management, when you click Chrome and then check User Settings, you should be able to see this Chrome Mobile Beta at the top. Note that Chrome management needs to be turned on first before enabling this setting. Once enabled, users who were signed into Chrome on Android or iOS with your organization's account will begin receiving the user settings you set. To see if a policy is supported on Android or iOS, check the light bulb next to each policy in the Admin Console. Please take note that this is an experimental feature, so make sure to read the Help Center carefully before enabling this. Another update for Chrome devices is related to managing client certificates. In many organizations, users must authenticate themselves using a digital certificate. to access certain networks and internal web resources. Client certificates allow users on Chrome devices to access these types of networks and resources securely. On September 4th, we launched an easy way to provision and manage certificates across a fleet of devices. We've provided an API so that extensions can support a variety of enrollment protocols and workflows. There are several steps in putting a client certificate on a device depending on your workflow. For more information, see Manage Client Certificates on Chrome devices in the Help Center. Another bit of news related to Chrome is a new 64-bit version. In late August, we released Chrome 64-bit for Windows, which brought benefits in speed, security, and stability. Now, we're bringing these benefits to OS X with Chrome 64-bit for Mac, version 39, due to be released in November 2014. While doubling the numbers of bits doesn't make it twice as good, it does allow us to make a number of speed and security improvements. You can check to see what version of Chrome you're running by checking the Chrome's About page. The final bit of news for Chrome is related to the Legacy Browser Support extension. If your organization wants to take advantage of the Chrome browser, but your users still need to access older websites and apps that require Internet Explorer, you can use Legacy Browser Support extension to easily switch between browsers. We've launched a Legacy Browser Support test channel so that you can test the next versions of the LBS Chrome extension and MSI before they're promoted to stable. There is one very important action needed for admins using Legacy Browser Support today, so listen up. The next stable release of LBS is slated for early November. Starting with this upcoming version and all subsequent stable and test versions, the MSI will be required in order for apps and websites to open in the appropriate browser. Therefore, it's critical to make sure that you have deployed the stable MSI to your users before November, so that Legacy Browser Support continues to function when it updates. You can find the download links for the 32-bit and 64-bit versions of the stable MSI at the links provided in the slides. The last section we're going to cover is some API updates for all you coders and developers out there. The Google Admin SDK allows developers to write applications to manage Google Apps domains, allowing you to manage users, groups, devices, and apps all from one place. In September, there were some important updates to this Admin SDK. First off, now available is a new feature in the Directory API which allows you to add custom attributes for your users. For instance, you could store the projects your users work on, their desk number, job level, hiring date, or whatever makes sense for your business. Once you define the custom attributes for your domain, all you have to do is get or set them just like any other attribute field. You also have control over the attribute's data type and visibility. Another new feature is the read access to all domain users. Historically, only admins were able to access the data in the Admin SDK. Beginning in September, any user, not just admins, will be able to call the Directory API and read the profile of any other user in the domain. Of course, only if allowed to do so by your access and profile sharing settings. This new feature allows you to build business applications such as corporate yellow pages or vacation management that can be accessed and used by all your users. Check out the documentation to learn more about the Admin SDK and specifically the Directory API. Finally, as we are discussing the Admin SDK, let's look at an important update on API deprecation. In May 2013, we introduced the Admin SDK, and later, in July 2013, we followed with the release of the new improved Email Migration API version 2. With each of these introductions, we also announced the deprecation of a set of corresponding APIs such as the Provisioning API and Email Migration API version 1, that would be replaced by the new APIs. As of April 20th, 2015, we will discontinue these deprecated APIs. This means that the service calls to these APIs are no longer supported, and Google Apps features implemented using these APIs will not function. For all you developers out there, you can find comparable functionality in the Admin SDK and the Email Migration API version 2 to transition to. In the coming weeks, we'll be contacting the domain admins whose applications currently use these deprecated APIs with an email reminder and guidance on the appropriate migration path. So, that's it from us this month. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your comments and questions below. This has been What's New in Google Apps recap of September 2014, and I'll catch you all next month.